When a young woman vanishes, a family's worst fears are realized.
We have never, ever suffered anything like this.
See my mom cry almost every day. As a son, you never want to see that.
As multiple motives behind her disappearance present themselves, so do some sinister secrets.
The bigamy wasn't discovered officially.
He is not the father of her unborn child.
We look back on Tuesday night. You weren't too convincing.
I lied to you.
When the search for justice hits a dead end, a family turns to a more mystical source of help.
I have to depend upon the supernatural to help me.
Behold, there's blood in the vehicle.
It was like a movie. It was just like that.
I called her phone and her phone was cut off. Somebody shut off the phone.
July 28, 2010. It's just past midnight on Nantucket Island, a picturesque tourist haven off the coast of Massachusetts. Most folks are peacefully sleeping, but Vivian Walker is in the throes of a horrific nightmare.
I had this dream, and I was like, oh my God, what's going on?
In her dream, Vivian is walking through a dark, wooded place, and then all of a sudden, she hears a scream.
She realizes the voice is that of her daughter, 23-year-old Trudie Hall.
I could hear her screaming in the night, like something happened to my child. I woke up, then my spine started hurting me. As mother, something goes wrong, you know.
Smart, fearless, and full of life, Nantucket resident Trudie Hall saw the world as her oyster.
She was like a go-getter. She was like, okay, then you want to do something, come, I'll show you.
Her ability to take things head on and not being scared, I think that's what I love the most.
Her laugh and her smile was so bright, and Trudy was someone that I saw myself looking up to when I was older.
After graduating high school in 2005, Trudie sought adventure far from home.
She went to college in Florida. When she went to college, she wants to learn everything. She likes Florida because it's warm, and she can go to the beach and wear what she want to wear and not being cold.
Though Trudie relished college life, in Florida, this Nantucket girl felt like a fish out of water.
Trudy decided to take a break from college and returned home. She missed her family and wanted to be close to them.
Advice from her mother, Vivian, led Trudie to her true calling.
I told her, why not go into medicine? You always guarantee you have a job.
She attended Cape Cod Community College.
She became a nursing assistant.
As Trudie's nursing career began falling into place, so did the other pieces of her life. In 2009, the ambitious 22-year-old caught the eye of another Nantucket resident, a hardworking Nepalese immigrant named Raj Ramani.
Trudy.
Hey, how's it going?
Very good. How are you?
Good.
Raj was 41 years old. He'd immigrated to the United States in 2004 and had worked at a restaurant.
Despite their 2-decade age difference, Trudie and Raj formed a fast connection.
Trudy, like Raj, had also immigrated to the United States.
She was born in Kingston, Jamaica in 1987, and she moved to Nantucket when she was 13 years old with her mother.
The couple's bond became so strong that a few months after Trudie and Raj first met, they decided to tie the knot.
They had a small wedding and a reception.
Though Trudy's family was pretty surprised at how quickly the relationship had progressed, she was happy, and that was all they really wanted.
Then in the spring of 2010, these newlyweds got another piece of good news.
She has this glow to her. So I was waiting on her to tell me that she's pregnant, but I knew she was pregnant.
I think she would be a great parent, not even just a parent, but a best friend also.
In late July, Trudie and Raj flew from Nantucket to Cape Cod for Trudy's 4-month checkup. It was scheduled for early the next morning.
It seemed like a joyous time in their lives and their future. I mean, the possibilities were endless.
But in the early morning hours of July 28th, Trudy's mother is tormented by a horrific nightmare.
She's walking through these dark woods. She can hear Trudy's screams, but she can't find her anywhere.
I said, no, something is wrong.
Trudy had her doctor's appointment early the next morning, and Vivian wanted her to get a full night's sleep, so she waited a few hours before checking in on her.
Around 6 a.m., Vivian starts texting Trudy.
I texted her. I said, remember your appointment, you got to start driving. She didn't text back. That's unlike her.
Minutes turn to hours, and Vivian's worries continue to mount. Then, at 9 a.m., a call comes in from Trudy's husband, Raj, and Vivian breathes a momentary sigh of relief.
Hello, Raj.
She assumed he was calling to check in for his wife and tell her about the appointment.
But little did Vivian know, the nightmare she awoke from earlier that morning is about to become a terrifying reality.
Raj actually tells her when he woke up this morning, his wife had disappeared.
I was like, oh my God, what's going on?
For 23-year-old Nantucket resident Trudie Hall, the summer of 2010 was shaping up to be life-changing.
Trudy and her husband, Raj, had just been married, and now they were looking forward to the upcoming birth of her first child. And on top of that, she had just graduated from Cape Cod Community College and was about to embark upon a career in the healthcare industry.
But in the early morning hours of July 28th, what began as a routine trip to Cape Cod for a prenatal exam devolved into a nightmare for Trudy's loved ones.
I had a dream, and I could hear her screaming. So the morning when I woke up, I texted her. She didn't text back.
Later that morning, Vivian gets a call from Trudy's husband, Raj, but he has some troubling news.
He said, Mom, didn't see Trudy. She's not there.
Vivian and Raj immediately report her missing to the Barnstable police on Cape Cod.
When was the last time you saw your wife?
Last night at our hotel room.
And you've been trying to reach her all day?
Yes, we both have. And I'm so concerned about her because she's pregnant.
Tell you what, would you be okay if we spoke with Mr. Romani privately just to narrow down details of the last time you saw your daughter?
Well, yeah, I mean...
Bring you right back in.
Okay, sure, no problem. I'll be right outside.
Speaking with investigators, Raj explains that he and Trudy's trip to Cape Cod had also been a mini getaway for the couple.
They rent a Toyota Avalon around 5:30 p.m.
They had checked into the Bayside Resort. They went to Cape Cod Mall, they grabbed some food, they saw a movie, made a nice evening of it.
So, Mr. Romani, what time did you get back to the hotel?
About 8:30, 9 o'clock.
And after that, did you go to bed?
I did. Trudy said she needed to go out to get some medical photocopies made.
Trudy asked Raj to go with her to make some photocopies. He said he was too tired and didn't go.
I tried to wait up for her, but I was pretty exhausted. And I fell asleep watching TV.
So after you had woken up, you didn't realize that she hadn't come back?
Well, not exactly. We were staying in separate rooms, so I knocked on her door around 7 a.m. and she didn't answer.
When Raj checked the parking lot, the couple's rental car was gone.
At that point, he alerted the hotel staff and they went to check on her. They found her belongings, but she was not there and her phone also was not there. He called several times, no response.
That's when I called my mother-in-law.
As investigators listen to Raj's account, they alert their colleagues to be on the lookout for Trudy's missing vehicle.
But as the search for Trudy amps up, investigators are baffled by one aspect of Raj's statement.
We were staying in separate rooms.
Why would a new, happily married couple check in 2 different rooms at a hotel?
It would seem odd that maybe there was some discord in the relationship.
Was there a reason why you stayed in separate rooms?
I smoke. She's pregnant. That's not good for the baby.
What about home? You share the same bedroom?
Actually, we don't live together. I live alone. Trudy has a roommate.
Raj tells police that cohabitation really didn't make sense for the two of them. They maintained separate residences because they each had leases that they didn't want to breach.
If you are experiencing problems in your marriage, now's the time to tell us.
We weren't. We were fine. I promise.
He said he was deeply in love with his wife and was extremely concerned about her whereabouts.
On one hand, Raj seems sincere, but let's be real honest here. What newly married couple stays in separate hotel rooms and lives apart? It seems like Raj is not telling the whole story, but at this point, there's no proof of foul play.
That afternoon, Barnstable detectives, accompanied by the Massachusetts State Police, talked to Trudie's roommate, a young woman named Michelle Thomas, to see if she can provide any additional information.
Have you talked to her in the past 24 hours?
No, we weren't really that close.
Trudie Hall's roommate told police that Trudie mostly kept to herself, either talking on the phone or surfing the internet.
But when detectives bring up Trudie's husband, Raj Ramani, the conversation gets interesting.
What about her husband? Did you know him at all, or?
I met him maybe twice, but it wasn't exactly what you'd call a normal relationship.
Care to shed some light on that?
Then she drops a bombshell.
It was a sham marriage.
She claims that Raj Ramani paid Trudie $20,000 for their October 2009 marriage.
Michelle couldn't provide proof for any of these claims, but she was sure the marriage was a sham just to get Raj citizenship.
But according to Michelle, Trudie's alleged fraudulent marriage to Raj isn't even the half of it.
She said Trudie was married not once, but twice.
In fact, Michelle says Trudie was still married to her first husband.
They were married in April of 2009. Later on that year, she married Raj Ramani in another county, also in Massachusetts.
Now, this is a truly crazy twist to the story. If she had married multiple men for money, like the roommate is alleging, not only is this marriage fraud, but it's bigamy as well.
The possibility of bigamy opens up a whole Pandora's box of suspects in this case.
Detectives can't help but wonder, is this the case of a woman on the run? Or maybe someone who had bit off one marriage too many? What Trudie's roommate tells detectives next will take an already shocking case to a whole new level.
There was so much more going on beneath the surface. This was just the tip of the iceberg.
It was strange. I didn't really understand it.
When Barnstable and Massachusetts State Police sit down with Trudie Hall's roommate, Michelle Thomas, they never could have imagined the shocking secrets that were waiting to be exposed.
She tells police that Trudie would marry immigrants to the United States in exchange for large amounts of cash.
According to Michelle, Trudie had married Raj Ramani in a sham marriage. She'd been married before, and she was still married to the guy.
Her first husband was Dewan McDowell. They were married in April of 2009.
And Michelle insists Trudie hadn't married Dewan for love either.
He was a Jamaican immigrant. He worked as a ceiling plasterer.
The roommate claimed that Trudie Hall accepted money for the marriage.
Marriage fraud for the purpose of immigration is a federal crime in the first place. But if you stir bigamy into the pot, which is a felony in Massachusetts, you're looking at even more major charges.
Wasn't she scared of getting caught?
Absolutely. And if you ask me, I bet she took a run for it before all the situation caught up with her.
The roommate mentioned that Trudie was interested to move back to Florida. That's where she went to college. It was a way to escape. She could start a new life.
With Michelle's statement in tow, detectives issue a statewide bolo for anyone matching Trudie's description. They also initiate a deeper dive into her background.
After a search of Trudie Hall's marriage records, it was discovered that Dewan married Trudie in Barnstable County. Trudie later married Raj Ramani in Plymouth County. There was no linkage of the marriage records across counties, and that's why the bigamy wasn't officially discovered.
When police approach Trudie's mother with this information, she's blown away.
Did you know about Trudie's previous marriage?
I was so surprised. I was like, really?
This was very confusing to her mother and at a very troubling time.
No, she would never do anything like that.
Despite this shocking revelation, Vivian insists her daughter would never run away, no matter how much legal trouble she might be in. With the statewide BOLO proving ineffective, investigators broaden their record search and dig up some even juicier details.
According to officials with the Nantucket Family Court, Trudy had inquired about divorce proceedings in early July 2010. She was scheduled to meet with a Nantucket divorce attorney on July 28th.
On the night of July 27th, she disappeared.
Although nothing in the records suggests which husband Trudy intended to divorce, both Raj Ramani and Dewan McDowell stood to lose everything if Trudy left them.
If you marry a U.S. citizen, you have to stay married for at least 5 years for you to gain U.S. citizenship yourself.
Could a potential divorce have jeopardized their residency status?
While police try to track down Trudy's first husband, Dewan McDowell, investigators ask husband number 2, Raj Ramani, to come back in for another round of questioning.
All right, Raj. It's time to come clean, all right? Just tell us the truth, okay?
I'm not lying. I love my wife.
You think she felt the same way?
Yes.
So what if I told you she was married to somebody else?
What?
Yeah. She was about to file for divorce.
From me?
I don't know, you tell us.
Raj seemed shocked by these revelations.
So you think this guy could be the father of her baby?
We thought you were the father, Raj.
I should have been.
Raj admitted to police that he knew he wasn't the father of Trudy's baby. She had come clean about that early in their marriage. But she never told him who the real father was, and she certainly never admitted that she was married to someone else.
Could all of this have been a reason for Raj to commit foul play?
Raj, given the circumstances, it would be understandable, you know, if you just snapped.
I didn't hurt my wife. I loved her. And the baby. Even if it isn't mine.
Despite his claims of innocence, detectives can't shake one detail about Raj's story.
Raj was the last person, presumably, to see Trudy alive.
And he basically had no alibi, except he was asleep in a room down the hall from where she disappeared.
But with no other evidence pointing Raj's way, and with no proof that Trudy's dead or alive, police are forced to let him go once again.
Less than 24 hours later, a Barnstable police officer makes a startling discovery.
This officer was aware of Trudy's bolo, and he decided to check a commuter lot. And as he was driving through the parking lot, he saw a car that caught his attention.
The officer found the Toyota Avalon that Raj Ramani and Trudie Hall had rented.
That was parked in a particular area that was tucked away, so to speak, from the rest of the cars.
The bolo earlier on the silver car, I believe I've got it.
The officer radios his finding back to dispatch, and within the hour, detectives arrive on the scene.
It was, for lack of a better description, a very bloody scene.
There were bone fragments, human tissue, and a .38 caliber round lodged inside the car.
The amount of blood loss in the car was so severe that police knew they were probably looking at a homicide case.
2 fingerprints were found on the grille of the car. They appeared to be bloody.
Will this lead to Trudy's abductor? Or is this just another new piece of the puzzle that is already getting more complex by the day?
The discovery of 23-year-old Trudie Hall's blood-stained rental car has turned a missing persons case on the quiet peninsula of Cape Cod into a potential homicide. Barnstable and Massachusetts State Police are working together in hopes that physical evidence found on Trudie's rental car may be the key to finding her assailant.
2 fingerprints were found on the grille of the car. They appeared to be bloody.
Investigators run the prints through their database, but their hopes are quickly dashed.
The fingerprint ends up not matching anybody.
The limited clues found in the vehicle didn't give police any clearer idea of what transpired or who was responsible. It could have been one of her 2 husbands or someone else who knew her. Of course, it could have just been a random abduction.
With the facts of the case still uncertain, police ramp up their search for Trudie Hall.
The Massachusetts State Police and the Barnstable Police conducted a massive search. They basically started searching the wooded areas near the commuter lot.
They search and search and search, but no luck.
Though the search for Trudie is ongoing, that afternoon, investigators sit down with Trudie's other husband, DeJuan McDowell.
DeJuan McDowell was a 31-year-old Jamaican immigrant who worked as a ceiling plasterer on Nantucket.
They went to DeJuan seeking answers, but as it turns out, he was very concerned. He was very upset that Trudie had gone missing.
When was the last time you saw Trudy?
Yeah, it's been a minute. Maybe a month. Man, I can't believe this happened.
Can you tell us where you were on July 27th and 28th?
He contends that he was working on Nantucket Island the last, 2 days that she had been seen alive. There are a lot of questions here. Did he know she was seeking out a divorce? Did he know anything about this second marriage? If he did, perhaps was he jealous that she had married again?
It's been brought to our attention that Trudy was pregnant. Do you know if you were the father?
No.
DeJuan tells detectives in no uncertain terms that he is not the father of Trudie's baby. But he says it's no big deal. They had recently become estranged, and he harbored no ill will towards her.
When pressed by detectives, DeJuan also denies allegations that his marriage to Trudie was a sham.
While DeJuan's reaction seems genuine, investigators are a little apprehensive because he had time to formulate a story, so they intend to check out his alibis.
In the meantime, detectives turn to Trudie's phone records from the night of her disappearance. Immediately, they identify a series of calls that merits investigation.
Leading up to her disappearance, she had been having phone correspondence of some type with Quoizel Wilson.
But who is Quoizel Wilson? Later that night, investigators pay a visit to the Cape Cod home 32-year-old Quoizel shares with his wife, Denise.
Police went over there. Both he and his wife, they were asleep.
He comes out on the porch, his wife is there, and they just ask him a few questions.
Do you know a woman by the name of Trudie Hall?
Yeah, I know Trudy. We know Trudy.
He says they attended church together on Nantucket.
Are you aware that she is missing?
Since when?
Since July 27th.
The 27th, I saw her that day.
Quoizel did admit that he had helped Trudy move some belongings into her hotel room at the Bayside Resort on July 27th.
She had given me a call. I was in the area, said she needed my help. So I did that. Then afterwards, I got some fast food, came back home.
And he said he stayed there the rest of the night.
So that would put you home at what time?
Probably about like 8 o'clock.
They asked, was there a sexual relationship going on? He adamantly denies it.
I would assume that you knew she was pregnant. Yeah, we knew she was pregnant. She was excited about the baby, couldn't wait for it to come. Any idea on who the father would be? No, but I mean, I would assume that it was her husband,
The following morning, police interview parishioners from the church Trudie and Quoizel both attended, in hopes of obtaining further insight into their relationship.
There was no indication that Trudie and Quoizel were involved. Everyone thought they were just friends, and Quoizel Wilson seemed to be a happily married man.
Wilson had moved from Nantucket to Cape Cod. He bought a house and was working as a truck driver.
But as police continue to dig, their search reveals Quoizel has a criminal past.
In November of 2008, he worked as a manager for the Nantucket Island Transit Authority. He was arrested and accused of stealing $8,000. He accepted a plea agreement where he was given a 2-year suspended jail sentence and ordered to pay restitution.
And there's one other unsettling detail about Quoizel's previous run-in with the law.
During that arrest, he was also charged with having an unsecured handgun in the vehicle.
It made them think of the bullets that they found in Trudie's rental car.
When police obtain Quoizel's phone records, they find out he hasn't been completely truthful with them.
Quoizel told police he was home by 8 p.m. the night of Trudie's disappearance, but police see a call to Quoizel's wife around 10:15 p.m.
And his phone was pinging 5 miles from his house at the service road between exits 4 and 5 west.
Investigators decide it's time to re-interview Quoizel Wilson. But on the morning of August 3rd, he beats them to the punch.
Quoizel Wilson requested a second interview with the Barnstable police.
Quoizel admits he hasn't been completely honest with police. When they ask why, he says the answer is obvious.
I was on the spot. Your wife did? Yeah. January or February, we started seeing each other. So you hadn't had a second relationship? Yeah.
Quoizel said he would see Trudy about twice a week at the hotel.
Now, did your wife know you would meet up with her? No.
Police again press Quoizel on whether or not Trudy's baby might be his.
Well, on one time, the condom did break. Did you guys ever talk about an abortion after that? A couple times. I told her, it's gonna mess up home, but eventually said she's not going to. So I was like, okay, let's try to keep it a secret as long as we can.
He admitted this baby would cause serious problems with his relationship with his wife.
When police ask Quoizel whether he owns any firearms, his answer raises red flags.
He does admit he owns a 9mm, but that the 9mm had been stolen.
When did your gun get stolen? It's either November or December of 2008. Did you ever report that gun stolen? No.
As for Quoizel's visit to Trudy's hotel room on July 27th, he admits the couple did more than just move luggage that day.
He did indicate that they engaged in sexual relations at the motel.
Quoizel says their liaison occurred around 6 p.m. that night, and afterwards he left the hotel and drove home.
Quoizel is adamant that Trudy was alive and well when he left her hotel room and that he had nothing to do with harming her.
The problem with this story is that police have his cell phone records, and they contradict his claim. He wasn't home that night.
Caught in a lie, Quoizel is now at the top of investigators' list of suspects. But as detectives put the screws to Quoizel, Trudy's family turns to a more spiritual search for the truth.
I said, God, you do this. You run this investigation.
In his second interview with investigators, Quoizel Wilson has come clean about his extramarital affair with 23-year-old Trudie Hall, who was missing and presumed dead.
Quoizel admits that he was involved sexually with Trudie Hall. He did also admit that they had a sexual encounter on the night of July 27th.
But Quoizel claims he left Trudy alive and well in her hotel room before heading home that night.
Police note to him that his cell phone pinged around a service road around 10:15 p.m. And so Quoizel basically says, hey, I did have a drug deal, a drug interaction with a guy named Jeremy Lynch.
Unable to concretely link Quoizel Wilson to Trudy's disappearance, detectives try to locate this Jeremy to verify his story. In the meantime, police make a shocking discovery when they turn back to Trudy's cell phone records. She called a man named Marvin Seneca a puzzling 12 times the night she disappeared.
Under questioning, he tells police he didn't know Trudy, but he actually did remember getting her calls.
On July 27th, he was home editing some video on his computer, and he got several back-to-back calls from a Nantucket phone number that he didn't recognize, so he didn't pick up.
But Marvin says a few hours later, he listened to the caller's message.
Marvin stated that she seemed distressed, and he couldn't tell the first name of the person leaving the message, whether it was a Rudy or a Trudy.
He didn't bother to call back because he didn't know her.
When police ask if he knows a man named Quoizel Wilson, Marvin says it doesn't ring a bell.
But investigators get the sense he isn't being completely truthful.
When they explain his phone records could give them a clue as to whether or not he's lying, Marvin suddenly has a change of heart.
He first denied that he didn't even know Quoizel, but it turns out they were friends. He admitted that he was lying.
Wilson was a motorcycle enthusiast.
So was Marvin, and so they knew each other from these circles.
And according to Marvin, Quoizel is the reason he so vividly remembers that series of mysterious calls.
On July 30th, he got a text from Quoizel that said 911. So Marvin, being a worried friend, called back.
Quoizel told Marvin that he needed him to come over to his house, that it was an emergency.
Marvin claims that once he got there, Quoizel made a shocking request.
Quoizel said a friend of his named Trudy had gone missing, and he needed Marvin to cover for him.
That alerted Marvin because he remembered the calls from the Nantucket number just a few nights earlier from this woman claiming to have the same name. He said he mentioned this to Quoizel, and Quoizel said that the missing woman must have gotten into his phone and just started dialing all his friends.
But if these allegations are true, why had Marvin lied to investigators in the first place?
Marvin said that when police showed up and they started asking a bunch of questions, he figured out pretty quickly that this thing with Quoizel was going to turn into a pretty big mess, so he started lying, just trying to stay out of it.
While Marvin's story sounds plausible, investigators know they just can't take his word for it.
Investigators asked Marvin if they could search his apartment. Marvin agreed, but ultimately, the search was a bust.
With the search of Marvin's apartment a dead end, investigators turned their attention to Quoizel's alleged partner in crime, Jeremy Lynch.
They asked Jeremy to confirm whether he saw Quoizel the night of July 27th.
Jeremy, agrees, yes, I did meet up with Quoizel.
That revelation would seem to confirm the details of Quoizel's story.
But when investigators push Jeremy about this alleged drug deal, he starts clamming up.
I don't know anything about drug deal. You want to go down for this? All right. I wasn't with Quoizel that night. He asked me to come live for him, but I don't want to take the rap for anything.
Jeremy's in the middle of this.
He was going to lie for him, but he decided against it.
Jeremy's story, along with Quoizel's phone records and admitted affair with Trudie Hall, gives investigators the probable cause they need to secure a search warrant of Quoizel Wilson's home.
On August 5th, 2010, police execute that warrant.
They found cleaning supplies for a 9mm pistol and receipts for purchase of that pistol.
They took several items of clothing, including jackets, belts, pants, things of that sort. His Nissan Armada, they brought it to their laboratories to look to see if they could find any sort of indications of Ms. Hall being on any of those items, specifically her blood.
At the police station, he drank some coffee in the interview room, and the police seized the cup to possibly use for DNA.
They wanted to see if it matched any DNA that might ultimately be found in Trudie's rental car.
They gathered all of that evidence, and after the battery of tests that were put forth on all of those items, came back negative.
None of it ties Quoizel to Trudie's disappearance.
Months pass, and the case languishes. For Trudie's family, the pain becomes unbearable.
You don't understand fully what's happening, and you're left out of so much.
I have to go through sleepless night. We have been through hell.
It was just hard to see my mom going through so much pain.
We have never, ever suffered anything like this in our family.
To see my mom cry almost every day. As a son, you never want to see that.
And the more Vivian suffers, the more she dreams of her missing daughter.
I said, I'm searching for you. Where have you been? And she said, I am where they put me. I am between two trees. I start praying. I said, God, just let somebody find her.
Ultimately, the case goes cold. But even as the seasons pass, Vivian's dreams persist, and she refuses to give up on the search for her daughter.
I still have hope, because the good thing is that God always be there for me and my family, and I trust him.
The family also hired a private investigator, and there was the $15,000 reward for information leading to a conviction.
Finally, in the spring of 2012, there's a development that could be the answer to Vivian's prayers.
April 12th of 2012, skeletal remains have been found by a man near Hayward Road.
It was a pretty wooded, isolated area about 15 miles from where Trudie's car was found.
The man picked up the skull thinking it belonged to an animal, but once he saw teeth, he knew it was a human skull.
Police are notified immediately. Minutes later, they arrive on the scene.
Investigators begin to examine the scattered remains. And sure enough, they're human and likely a female, and one who was pregnant.
At this point, I think everybody's gut was probably telling them these were the remains of Trudie Hall and her unborn child.
The police, over the phone, they said to me, do you have a picture of her smiling? And I said, you want a picture? I'll bring it.
Standing in this remote wooded area, a chill runs down Vivian's spine.
I said it's her because I had this vision about 2 trees, and the 2 trees are right there. She's right there.
When the photo is compared with the victim's skeletal remains, it confirms the terrible truth.
She has a little gap in between her teeth, so that's her.
It was Trudie Hall.
I said, thank you, God, I found her remains. And at least I found her.
Trudie's remains are transported to the Massachusetts State Medical Examiner's office. A few days later, they issue the formal cause of death.
She was shot 8 to 9 times in the torso.
DNA testing is also conducted on the fetal bones found alongside Trudie's body in hopes of identifying the father.
Detectives didn't know if it would be Raj Ramani, DeJuan McDowell, Quoizel Wilson, or someone else.
And look who the father is.
Quoizel ended up being the father of Trudie's unborn child.
And as investigators continue to search the area where Trudie was murdered, the case against Quoizel continues to mount.
There were multiple .38 caliber projectiles found at the scene.
Police determined that the 9mm gun Quoizel admitted he once owned could have fired these .38 caliber bullets.
But perhaps it's the crime scene itself that provides the most intriguing piece of evidence.
After finding Trudie's burial site, police went back at the cell phone records again.
At 10:45 p.m., Quoizel's phone pings off of Route 28, which is approaching the site where Trudie's remains were found.
This is just too big of a coincidence, given how remote the location was.
At the same time, phone records also help eliminate Trudie's 2 husbands, Raj Ramani and DeJuan McDowell, as suspects.
It turns out that DeJuan had been on Nantucket Island working July 27th and 28th, and on the 27th, that's when Trudie was with her second husband, Raj Ramani, on Cape Cod.
Raj Ramani was ruled out because of the triangulation data of his cell phone. The cell phone was at the hotel.
But one loose end still remains: the 2 bloody fingerprints found on Trudie's rental car.
The initial time they put into a computer system to try to determine whose fingerprints they were, they didn't have any hits. They resubmitted those prints and came up with a hit.
It's been 2 years since 23-year-old mother-to-be Trudie Hall vanished into thin air. Investigators have identified Trudie's lover, Quoizel Wilson, as the prime suspect in her murder.
You've got phone records from the night of Trudie's disappearance that pinged very close to where the remains of Trudie were found. DNA evidence has also determined that he was very likely the father of the baby. .38 caliber shell casings were found near the remains, a very close match with the 9mm gun that Quoizel used to own.
With all other evidence pointing to Quoizel's guilt, authorities have one loose end to tie up: the smudge of fingerprints found on Trudie's abandoned rental car.
The initial time they recovered those fingerprints, they didn't have any hits. They resubmitted those prints through the computer systems again about 2 years later and came up with a hit.
A hit for a man named Sammy Nelson.
It turns out that Sammy Nelson is a 50-year-old Cape Cod resident.
Detectives aren't sure why the fingerprint hit this time and not the time before.
It's like, who is this guy? Could he be an accomplice? Is he the true mastermind? Could Quoizel Wilson actually be innocent?
But when Sammy sits down with investigators a few days later, he not only denies knowing Quoizel Wilson, but claims he's never heard of Trudie Hall either.
What if I told you that this woman was murdered and your fingerprints were found on the grill of her rental car?
What? I ain't killed nobody.
Sammy remains adamant he has no idea how his fingerprints ended up on Trudie's vehicle.
He gives 4 interviews in May of 2012, and at no point mentions anything about putting his hand on the grill of that car.
But in November of 2012, during his 5th and final interview, Sammy Nelson recalls one detail he'd previously overlooked.
July 27th, 2010, I was with my family early in the morning, and we stopped at a convenience store over in Hyannis.
Hyannis is one of the villages that dot Barnstable.
He came out of a store and stabilized himself by putting his hand on the car.
Did you see any blood on the car at all when you touched it?
No, I did not.
So what Sammy was suggesting was that yes, he might have rested his hand on Trudie's rental car, but whatever blood police found must have gotten there afterwards.
Would you be willing to take a polygraph exam to?
Of course, yes.
Police had their doubts that Sammy was telling the truth, but he passed the test with flying colors.
Unlike Quoizel Wilson, Sammy had no background with Trudie Hall, and detectives couldn't find any motive to murder her.
In November of 2013, prosecutors charged Quoizel Wilson with the murder of Trudie Hall.
Since Trudy was only 4.5 months pregnant, they couldn't add on the charge for murder of an unborn child.
For Trudie's family, Quoizel's arrest is difficult but welcome news.
I was kind of surprised because these are people that I know that goes to church. I said, God, just put him away for life, that it does not come out.
I was just hoping for the conviction, and I wanted to get it over with.
On May 4th, 2015, Quoizel Wilson appears in front of a Barnstable Superior Court jury.
I just didn't like seeing him because you could see there was like a smirk on his face. Like he thought he was gonna get away with something.
In their opening statements, prosecutors portray Quoizel as a cheating husband who would do anything to keep his affair with Trudie and her pregnancy a secret.
I said, God, people are so cruel. You don't have to support the child. You don't have to do anything. Just leave her, let her be.
Then, using data from Trudie and Quoizel's cell phones, prosecutors spell out what they believe happened the night of July 27, 2010.
After Quoizel and Trudie hooked up in her hotel room at about 6 o'clock that night, she then went to see a movie and went to dinner with Raj. She got back to the hotel about 8:30 or 9, and then left again to meet Quoizel at about 9:45 in a commuter lot.
Quoizel's phone pings, and Trudie's phone also pings to that same location.
This could draw an inference that Trudy and Quoizel were together at that same time period.
Move over. I'll drive.
Okay. Then they drove west on the service road toward Route 28. At that time, 10:15 p.m., Quoizel's phone pings on a service road. Trudie's phone also pings to that same location on Route 28. They ended up pulling over, and an argument ensued.
What's wrong? You seem angry.
That damn baby in your stomach.
You mean our baby?
Well, it's my problem when my wife finds out.
Well, you should have thought about that before we had sex.
At some point during said argument, Trudie frantically tried to call Marvin Seneca, who was a friend of Quoizel.
Who you call?
None of your business.
Hang up the phone.
I'm not hanging
Give
up.
me the damn... I said, give me the damn phone. I told you you should have got that damn abortion.
Well, I didn't, so deal with it.
Prosecutors believe that's when Quoizel acted.
Quoizel shot Trudie Hall in the torso. Then he drives her body south on Route 28 to Hayway Road, and that's where he dumps her body.
He returned back to the commuter lot approximately 11:30, then took his car back home. He was home by 12:30 a.m.
On May 15th, a Barnstable Superior Court jury finds Quoizel Wilson guilty of first-degree murder.
I knew once he was convicted, I could be able to move on. It was relief.
He was sentenced to Walpole State Prison for a term of life, no parole, which is mandatory in the state of Massachusetts.
You can't take an innocent life and be set free.
There is no sin that goes unpunished in this earth. You know, the police did their work. He will not see the light of day again. And I get this peace.
Though nothing will ever bring back Trudie Hall or her unborn child, her mother Vivian remains steadfast in her faith. And Trudie's siblings will forever hold her memory dear.
I think this whole process has made me the person that I am today. It takes a while, but the best thing you can do is just push through, and you'll get through it.
You cannot move on with yourself without forgiveness. As hard as that is in the position we're in, you have to do it, or else you'll never have peace. Forgive the person and continue to move on. Love the people who are with you, and remember those who are not.